Last time, we talked about what a mood disorder actually is. A malfunction in the system your brain uses to regulate mood, not a character flaw or an intensified version of a normal feeling. If you haven't seen that one, it's worth watching first. This time, we're going deeper into the part almost nobody explains well. Why this actually happens, and what fixing a broken regulating system really looks like from the inside. Let's start with the question everyone eventually asks. Why did this happen to me, or to someone I love? The honest answer is that there's rarely one answer. Mood disorders come from an overlapping mix of genetics, brain chemistry, and environment. And for most people, it's not one of those acting alone. It's all three, stacking on top of each other. Start with genetics. If a parent or sibling has had major depression or bipolar disorder, your own risk goes up significantly compared to the general population. That doesn't mean it's destiny. Most people with a family history never develop a mood disorder themselves. But it does mean some people are born with a regulating system that's simply built more sensitively, more prone to tipping out of balance under the same pressure that another person's system would absorb without issue. Twin studies back this up in a striking way. Identical twins, who share nearly all their genes, are far more likely to both have a mood disorder than fraternal twins are. That's not proof of pure genetic destiny. It's strong evidence that biology loads the gun, even if it doesn't pull the trigger alone.
Then there's brain chemistry, which is more complicated than the version most people have heard. For years, depression was explained to the public as simply low serotonin, as if the fix were just topping off a tank. The real picture is messier and more interesting. It's not just the amount of any one chemical messenger. It's how efficiently your brain's receptors respond to them, how quickly they're recycled, and how entire networks of brain regions communicate with each other. Some mood disorders involve reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for regulating emotion and making decisions, alongside overactivity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system for threat and fear. Picture a car with a weak set of brakes and an accelerator that's stuck slightly down. That's closer to what's actually happening than a simple chemical shortage. And then there's environment, which doesn't cause a mood disorder out of nothing, but it can act like a trigger pulling a loaded gun, or steadily wear down a system that was already fragile. Chronic stress, childhood trauma, major loss, even long-term sleep disruption can all change brain chemistry over time in ways that make a mood disorder more likely to emerge, especially in someone who is already genetically predisposed.
This is why two people can go through the exact same hardship, a job loss, a breakup, a death in the family, and one develops a lasting depressive episode, while the other, painfully, grieves and moves forward. It was never a test of strength. It was two different regulating systems responding to the same pressure in two different ways. So if it's not one single cause, what does actually fixing it look like? This is where the thermostat metaphor from last time earns its keep. You don't fix a broken thermostat by yelling at the room to be warmer. You fix the actual mechanism, or you bring in someone who knows how to. Treatment for mood disorders usually works the same way, targeting the mechanism, not the mood. Medication is often the most misunderstood tool in that process. Antidepressants and mood stabilizers aren't happiness pills. They don't create an emotion that wasn't there. What they actually do is help recalibrate the underlying chemical signaling, adjusting how available certain neurotransmitters are or how sensitive the receptors are to them, closer to a range where the system can start regulating itself again. That's also why they typically take weeks to show an effect. It's not a switch. It's closer to slowly retuning an instrument that's been out of tune for a long time. Therapy works on a different layer of the same system. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, doesn't just help someone think positive. It actually helps rebuild the neural pathways involved in how someone interprets and responds to stress, which over time can measurably change brain activity, not just self-reported mood. For some people, especially with milder or moderate depression, therapy alone is enough. For others, especially with more severe depression or bipolar disorder, medication and therapy working together outperform either one alone. because they're targeting different parts of the same malfunctioning system. One recalibrating the chemistry, the other rebuilding the patterns running on top of it. And then there's everything outside a clinician's office that genuinely does matter, even though it's often unfairly the only advice people get. Sleep, exercise, sunlight, structured routine. None of these cure a mood disorder on their own, and it's genuinely harmful when that's the only suggestion someone in a real depressive episode receives. But they do support the same biological systems medication and therapy are working on, which is why they're usually recommended alongside real treatment, never instead of it.
Here's the part worth sitting with as we close this out. None of this is quick, and none of it is guaranteed to look the same for two different people, because no two regulating systems are broken in exactly the same way. Finding the right medication, the right therapist, the right combination often takes trial and real patience, which is exhausting and disheartening in a way that's rarely talked about honestly. But the system is fixable, not by force of will alone, but with real tools applied consistently over real time.
If any part of these two videos sounded like your own life or someone else's, that was never meant as a diagnosis. Only a professional can actually give you that. But it was meant to replace the idea that this is a character problem with the more accurate, more hopeful one. It's a mechanism. And mechanisms, unlike character flaws, can actually be repaired.